We are going to begin. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to this, our third annual Phyllis Webb Memorial Reading. My name is Stephen Scobie. I'm a professor at Simon Fraser University, and I'm a member of the Board of Poetry in Canada. Those two entities have created and shared this event. I want to begin by acknowledging the lands on which we are gathered and on which I live and work here at the university. The traditional and ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kaikite, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tawasin peoples. And as I've done in previous years, and thinking about Phyllis, I find myself looking west towards Salt Spring Island, where Phyllis lived a large part of her life. And the Cowichan, Sayut, Malahat, Sikkim, and Sandwich peoples who shared those beautiful islands between us and Vancouver Island. Relationship and connections, even when we are unaware of the full extent of our relatedness, our relations, and our connectedness and our connections, is crucial to how we might dwell on this earth now. So you're all welcome tonight. I've also asked my colleague from the Department of French at SFU, and asked Atakora to give us a French welcome as well.
Bonjour, bonsoir tout le monde, soyez les bienvenus. On a voulu vous accueillir aussi en français parce que c'est un événement bilingue. Nous voulons vous dire également que c'est de la poésie ici, mais aussi c'est le partage. Nous voulons vous accueillir avec 3 mots essentiellement en français. Le premier mot qui me vient à l'esprit, c'est le mot résistance. Pourquoi la résistance? Parce que la poésie est résistance aux mots qui sont récupérés, aux mots qui sont manipulés, aux mots que les politiques voudraient utiliser pour nous diviser. Donc, la poésie est résistance. La poésie est également partage. Entre le dit et le non-dit, nous venons ici pour apprendre, comprendre, interroger et continuer à vivre de façon à résister. On revient encore au mot. Et le dernier mot que je voudrais partager avec vous, c'est la rencontre. La poésie est rencontre parce qu'il y a des imaginaires, des joies, des douleurs que nous découvrons qui nous permettent d'interroger la vie, mais également de rêver autrement le monde à venir. Merci et bienvenue à tous.
Thank you, Anas. A few thank yous and just a little plan of what's about to happen. So I do want to thank Poetry in Canada and Simon Fraser University's English department, including our indefatigable communications coordinator and camera operator, Rebecca Salustris, and to James Fleming from our Poetry in Canada board for creating the little pamphlets we have, and we've done this every year, of the poets, of a sample of the poets' work. So there is a pamphlet, if you missed it when you came in, at the front desk there when you leave. Make sure you try and grab a pamphlet of Aaron and Chantal's work that was created special for this event. Also, thank you to Isabella Wang, who's, I hope in the room, not still out there, there she is, who's been selling some books of Chantal's and Aaron's, which are at the front too. There are a few other books that Aaron herself brought that you can also purchase, a very Vancouver-centric text, and you could see Aaron afterwards to purchase those as well. This year's Phyllis Webb Memorial Award recognizes 2 powerhouse Montreal poets, Erin Moray and Chantal Neveu. Both poets will read, Chantal first and Erin, momentarily, and then they'll be joined on stage here by 2 other wonderful Montreal poets, Oana Avasalikwe and Annie Lafleur. You'll hear bios and stuff here eventually. A quick word on Poetry in Canada, which is a project I was invited to join. In fact, there's 3 of us or so in the room who are board members of that project. the original founders of the project were no longer part of it, but we were all invited at some point to join. And the idea is to found a poetry library, a Canadian poetry library, writ large and very open and capacious in terms of its definition of what is Canadian poetry. Canadian poetry being something that has some relationship to these lands that we call Canada, but we're not too worried about where you're born or where you live now. But maybe you pass through these lands at some point in your global trajectory, and you might have something that you might have engaged with poetry in that way at some point in time. We would love to see a venue, a place, a library, a physical building. We just need, maybe $30 million. I just up the number every time I think of it. I look at Vancouver's real estate and go, yeah, maybe $40 million. I don't know. Get a shack somewhere to stick some books in. That'd be great. We'll figure it out. But anyhow, talk to me, check out the website, poetrycanada.org. We're trying to do things. I always say a few words about Phyllis and read a quick poem of Phyllis's, and I want to do that right now. But it's also a way of saying why these two poets as well. Each year, this award honors poets that I feel at least carry on some legacy of Phyllis Webb's. Some days, and certainly today, how I thought it was, poets who are intellectually and passionately intense and rigorous, because that's what Phyllis was. Poets who see poetry as a mode of thinking and being. I think all four poets you'll actually hear from tonight that's true of. One thing I've wanted to do for a number of years, though, is honor Phyllis's Montreal connection, because she has a Montreal connection. Phyllis lived in Montreal from about 1950 to 1956 or so. She wrote her first poems there, really, and she'd written a few in Vancouver but before she left. But she was in her early 20s, and she wrote all the poems that were in her first independent book, her first solo book, Even Your Right Eye, while she was in Montreal. And she loved Montreal. She loved the French language. Over the years I knew Phyllis, if I ever said anything in French, which I do atrociously, and you'll hear more of that at some point here, Phyllis would instantly correct me. But she had a love of French language. She would listen to Radio Canada rather than CBC Radio often in her house, and just had that connection. Things like the art movements in Montreal of that time and other writers in Montreal, although the writers were mostly Anglophone that she was engaging with, really meant a lot to her. Thus, to bring people like Aaron and Chantal here. But a quick Phyllis Webb Montreal poem. And this is a poem called Marion Scott. And Marion Scott was an Anglophone poet who, in complicated ways, Phyllis was close to, as well as her husband, Frank Scott, who was a poet. Marion Scott. If she is a moth, then all light is lured toward her. This she consumes and becomes the moth burning in its own light. Brighter than all the stars and planets, her central flame transmutes the nerveless sun into a spine of white, which darts the imageless world back into space. Pigments she takes and breaks them into one pearl smoking whiteness, and then I directs hand to flourish the first morning into fire. The walls float from her house and wing with paintings into all ourselves. For I have seen around her head flying the whole career of color, and in her hands the age of darkness dying. Light, oh, it swims from the tragic sun into her instant miracle, where, caught in the wire net of form, she twists and turns it into days, urchins and angels, blood of our blood, bone of her luminous bone. Let me introduce our poets and get out of the way. Since 1979, Montrealer Erin Moray has published 24 books: poetry, essays, texts on translation, memoir, biofiction, collaborative poetry essay, and is translator or co-translator of 33 other books from French, Galician, I should ask you how to say this, Portugal?
What?
Portugal?
Portugal.
Portugal, thank you. Portuguese, Spanish, and from Ukrainian with Roman Ishak. Ishakiv. Those are all in English. As well as 2 books of poetry into French from Galician, Chuspado, and from English, Abasilikwe. Recent translations include, I'm jumping ahead myself, aren't I? Chuspado's The Poem Writes Itself in Final Lines, that's from Galician, and Chantal Nouveau's You from French, which you will hear about shortly. Feuilleline, an aporetic migration via the modernisms of Rukeyser, Bishop, and Grimke, is Morey's own latest poetry hybrid text, and that's available from Isabella over there. Her work in poetry and translation has twice received the Governor General's Literary Award for Poetry in 1988 for Furious, a book I studied in about 1990 in a Canadian poetry class at UVic with Stephen Scobie, which we also read at Phyllis Webb, so I did poem in the same class. And the Governor General for translation in 2021 of Chantal Nouveau's This Radiant Life. She holds 2 honorary doctorates and has been International Translator in Residence at the Queen's College, Oxford, and Creative Fellow, Woodbury Poetry Room, Harvard University. Says Morey, all my life, poetry. Chantal Nouveau is a Québécois francophone author of 7 books of poetry, including La Vie Radieuse and You, published by La Peuplade. She has created several solo and collaborative interdisciplinary literary works presented in Canada and abroad. At the heart of her practice, a method of scriptage based on listening irrigates a literal and physical poetry in which she explores idyll in a multidimensional way. To favor writing in relation and on-site, she was part of the research group Artistic Strategies of Knowledge Spatialization affiliated with Laval University. And she has held several residencies, including Maison de la Poésie de Nantes, France, Passaporta and Villa Hellebusch in Belgium, and Villa Valberta in Germany. Her books translated in English are published by Book Hub Press, and several are available out here. Coit by Angela Carr, A Spectacular Influence by Nathaniel. This Radiant Life by Erin Morey, which won the 2021 Governor General Literary Award, as mentioned a moment ago, and also winner of the 2021 Nelson Ball Prize. And You, also recently translated by Erin Morey. Chantal Nouveau is based in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, and she will be taking the stage right now. Please welcome Chantal Nouveau.
Avant que ce soit du sang, c'est de l'eau. L'envie immédiate de marcher ensemble sur la montagne, spontanément. Nos sexes séparés, appelés. Poignets choisis, nos paumes. Riches, les heures, nos gorges. De plein pied, le miroir. Prégnance de nos corps à corps. Le cadrage sur les arbres, la lumière, c'est majeur. La formation de nos cœurs précède celle de nos hémisphères. Il en va ainsi de notre bien. Nous n'avons pas besoin de parler. La vie est longue. Beautiful. Nous avons un mur contre lequel le ciel est le même, unique. Avant ses pupilles, son haleine. Je regarde sa bouche, les sillons, les monts. Cercle rétréci des iris, du trou noir le tube, il me voit. Impulsion. Une programmatique implicite, ascension. Les façades de quartier, rémanence de Rio. Une cour, un jardin, l'escalier, colimaçon, les degrés, enchanteurs, les érables adjacents, les faux acacias. Figuration de promesses, de caresses, bruissement arrondi d'une fontaine, son ténu, goût métallique de la ville, un magnétisme, du palais aux narines, résonance infra, warm silver, table basse, la chair des poissons, l'air sous le plafond du studio, une loge. Nous faisons connaissance. Le solstice d'été change le ciel. Nous déjouons la curiosité en devançant les questions. Sphère privée, révélation spontanée, l'ineffable, fraîcheur de ruisseau. Sommes-nous déjà lus, dénudés? Nous nous exposons. Fluidité, gravité, compassion, le charme, l'intimité, prémisse d'un banquet, Héphaïstos, Aristophane, vestige, Dionysie, vertige, Empédocle, bonheur, teneur de futures mises à l'épreuve. À l'aise, nous nommons les grands amours, les infections, les décennies, fidélité, paroles données, offenses, blessures, miracles, les amitiés durables, gaie, santé, généalogie actuelle, virtuelle, portrait de couple, nombreux, déjà, ils se lèvent. Rasade. Les bambous se rapaissent d'eau de pluie, transfert de délectation, euphorie, tentation, réparation, congruence, paradoxal privilège, effraction, permissivité, un mouvement. Nous nous embrassons. We kiss, convergence. Pulse beats, the curve of the eyelids, we embrace. Before, mirror, on my neck, a breath. You are my fantasy. Mercurial drape of the curtains, prism of and photons on the wall, vis-a-vis, cold, solid, gleaming, velvet at my feet. We revolutionize. The air between the legs, we move. Are we sleeping? Introspective meditation at night. Down will demand more of us. A disclosure, a declaration. I came to make love. It's nature. Our arts take form before our hemispheres, so it's with our connections. We have no need to speak. Life is long, beautiful. We have a wall against which the skies the same, unique. In the name, love. The inside in rivers, the air, a tree, for example, vanadium, a slowness, primordial, attraction, iron, at the heart of the earth, I don't know before, from where, from which meteorites, up, down, bottom, top. We are not alone. We stand in paths. Magnets, 25. Charm, strange. We vibrate. Our letters, the erasers, the strings, 10. Indivisible. Our names, our bust. Without hierarchy. Photons, intermediaries, in transition. 2, 3. The immense, canyon, dense and tender. Krypton, from the Greek. Hidden, helium, gas and rare earths. Noble, bedrocks, the flanks, the branches, the arms, the length of bodies, exposed, nearly inert, framed. We move. Everything moves. Our gang, the snow, the clouds. Is it a region? We are alive. We go willingly. sensation of common good. Word flow, locked or unlocked. They are different speeds. Don't run out of breath. Don't kill it. There's lot of latitude. Things come naturally, just because it's fun. It's different for each person. The detail, du point de vue éthique. Eye to eye, with an amplification. See you, see me. We give it a try. Climatisation, the distance each day. Not in extremis, physical, regular, constant and irregular, incarné, much love. At the very least, the time is short. Okay, back to concert, magnificent. Thanks for the rose. Life is transitory. It's a mindset. It's stable. At this point, respiration profonde. It's elementary. The enclosures, a luminousness. You are free. The sky, its chemistry. This is the frame, the passage, demise. It alters things. You see it all. It's all there. The hum, the sun, ubiquitous. Soudain, les oiseaux. Cardinalis, cardinalis. Is it an idol? The soil matters to us. Compact area, a square in a square. We dissociate hostilities. Focal points of aggressivity. Hills light, weight distributed on the sole of the feet. Blinking, magenta, in a fraction of a second, a détente, an opening, the entry. It's the moment. Harmony is or isn't. To each attack, a precise reaction, simultaneous, a legitimate defense, gestural, immediate, proportional, reversible, a channel, energy, cardinal, kinetic, pivot, sideship, facing, eyelids, blades, fall, we too. Exemplary conveyors, in perfection and elegance, in various moves, our art, our steps, resonance of rhythmic, indices, and sympathetic systems, meridians, circular sweeps and other cardiac graph lines are tunics, haptic, markers, suit of pine, needles, sepia, intangible bodies, outside laws, the words, hinges, hinge pins, our plasticity, stomach and brain, pelvic birds not visible, paint brushes, the gravity between the hips, our base with the air, we train for suppleness, suchness, speed, with thought, amplitude, minima, maxima, under the rotation of propellers, the sound, helicopter, police. On the plateau, agora, long sticks, short sticks, we hurl forward in all directions, all shapes and sizes, men and women, dancing bodies, all ages, we enter the situation, and in keeping with the best of forms, we create dozen of thousand techniques to absorb, to bend, to deviate, fist and vectors, to unbalance, to immobilize in placing ourselves, remobilizing with resources, energies, the north, we ready ourselves. Guetter, pratiquer, anticiper, tailler. To attend, practice, anticipate, own. The void, space. Damandine, carbonic, bare-ended. Here is your art, Empereur, see it. Can you hear it? Attuned to values, now it vibrates, firepower, electromagnetic in its field, 5,000 times stronger than the brain. It's amazing. You can't forget who you are. You can simply be. Finally, totally be. Power generating power. Centered with the rest of the stars, extinguished, exoplanets, provisional agglomerates, similar, our liquids, pupils, laser, our channels. Are they tubes? I marvel. Is this life radiant? Electricity, pips of silica, or sea germ, carbon, their liaisons, reflections. Is this light what we form together? Mountain, rock-seated, shadows, slopes, concordant profiles, enigma of our sediments, pulsations, ignorant organic, anatomic, subatomic, nano. We turn around into a milieu. Negligible variance, dissolution of controversies. We all feel alive and living, fine, dispossessed, disentangled. I want to say delivered, neither subject nor object in the magma. Feu. Someone has died. A person, an animal. Mourning and rebirth, initiations, lemmas, to augment the real with fire, a thing ancient and the sun, still, matrix, in being, our bones, pulsions, fascias, sulfur, flash. On the wild side, all is economy, architecture, culture, agriculture, contiguous, one inside the other. Domesticity and linguistics, nothing is anecdotal. The mutations, invisible, discrete, radiation, possessions, dispossessions, the alternation. Rupture reversed into rupture, loss into delight. The difference between committed and obliged. That which is, that which might be, or not. Potentia, attention, lexicon, poésie. Vertical, frugal, lush, peaceable, pacifying, vita activa. It's in the voice. Syllables rebound, stamina, maiotics, put into play, into world, practices, roots, to extend ourselves, to keep apprehending, to comprehend, to come to know, to translate, to emerge into gaiety. That's what connects us. To share bread, Gouda, daily egg yolk, the world news, wars, decapitations, explosions, elections, Ebola, Nobel, succulents, Semper Vivant, we live together, monsters, eros, adorable, mean, What do you mean? Are we amiable, sufficiently loving? Is this autonomy? We don't exist in our mutualities. It's good to be giving. We don't belong to each other. We belong to the whole. Specimens, beyond positions. Soma and German, we move from source to source. In the interstice, we breathe fresh energies, phrenic centers, symbiosis, pneuma from our lips, bubbles, floating, suspended, transparent, radiant, aid, gloves, polymers, solar, plexus, amid our chest, buds, dense orb, chlorophyll, bedded in white silica, our arts, mixed gases, carbonic dioxide, light, photosynthetism, and vivo before our eyes, in so many loggias, 8 billion filia opera of our breathing, millimetric, seedling, wide range, pH, balanced, linked, our sense silent in exchanging, on the spot, we change. Explicitly, vita, data, capta, exo, eso, abolished, fair growth, seeds, cruciferous spring, leaves, radish, brassica, lucina, amarant, mizuna, arugula, Abyssinian mustard, aligned with the equinoxes. We go on, alone, collaborating, co-op and monitoring, spring banquet, banquet de printemps, primavera. We intermingle, nous nous mélangeons, mangeons, we eat, reconnaissant, grateful.
Hi, everybody. Wow, it's good to see all these people. Just want to thank Steve Collis, Simon Fraser, Poetry in Canada, for inviting Chantal and I. We're both really grateful. And for inviting Juana and Annie as well, so that we can talk and you can kind of spy on us as if we're still in Montreal. It's really great to see people I recognize. Cousin and his family, so that's really great. I'm going to, my reading's mostly focused on translational things, so I'm going to read a little bit of several things. The first poems I'm going to read are from Solar Storm by the Chilean poet Andres Hens, who is his first book in English. It took me 20 years to translate this much of his work. His work is very hard to translate. It's very unusual Spanish, and I'm not a natural translator from Spanish. I'm more falo gallego, traduzo do gallego, e traduzo da língua derivada do gallego, português. But so I can understand Spanish because it's the colonial language in Galicia. But it's not a language that's natural for me to translate from. So Andres Hens, anyways, cult writer. This is Carlos Soto Roman, who's a Chilean poet some of you may recognize. Cult writer, hidden writer, writer of what the folds of history hide, is raised here from the antipodes of literature, with a poetic project that stands out for its forcefulness and hybridity. A poetry of articulation and disarticulation, Solar Storm moves between broken narratives, materialities, letters, emails, diary fragments, critical essay, and experience. In his diverse cultural scaffolding, Hens combines indigenous writing and languages, the history of Western literature, post-structuralist philosophy and linguistics, manipulating geographical and scriptural boundaries, breaking down, chewing, and digesting language like no other. So I'm just going to read 3 short poems.
Is he a contemporary writer?
Yes. Yeah. He's Steve's age.
Oh, yeah.
Younger than me. So this is a poem. Sometimes because I can't get all the nuances in any way in a translation, I added there's translators' footnotes at some of the poems, at the end of some of the poems, which are generative footnotes, not explicatory. Here we go again, dice given. All and nothing written down, or method of identifying, recollecture, grips, rowing and rowing, bestowing what it does not have. Name. The imperial ardently given, gift from shore to shore, implausible. Don Diego, here's the skinny. If you won't give it, you're at mercy from the bottom of the given. The footnote here says, the use of give, gift, bestowals, stowaway, stolen. Diego de Almagro, the skinny, conquistador, shows up in Chile, stealing it for the king. Can you or anyone take the chance? What reading itself tears out of the heart? The link between plausible and generosity. Generative, nerve operator, the nerve of him, or neve, snow. This is another little poem called Irrevocably Flowing. What are you doing here again, Fraserese, so unkempt, not with your name nor millennial fame, type picado, with the dew but with your stony syllables? Not yearning or scraping and pre-assenting from the door, where the arch-poet proclaimed that heads rolled like flowers from the four corners of the world in seasons of drought. Dew is without return, Fraserese yet to come, stonewater, with all that groping around. And this poem is about two poets. It's called Neruda and Emma. And the Emma Villazon, everybody knows who Neruda was. Emma Villazon was a bright light of the rising Andean generation of poets and partner of André Sergens. She died suddenly of a stroke on a winter's day in August 2015 at the age of 34 in the El Alto airport in Bolivia, her birthplace. Raquel and Naphtali, while biblical, are also Villazon's middle name and one of Neruda's. Neruda's Santiago City house, La Chascona, the Shambles, is now a museum. Naphtali, which means my struggle in Hebrew, is often represented by a deer or a hind. Rachel means you, and was one of the wives of Jacob, father of Naphtali. So though they are not directly related, Rachel is older than Naphtali. Hence wrote this poem as a tribute to Villazon at La Chascona in August 2018. Villazon's books are fabulous. De una caída, rubricancieros y temporarias y otros poemas. And I will remark, if you look in the archives of the Capilano Review, it's the only review, I think, in North America who's published poems by Emma Villazon in translation several years ago. Alike Neruda and Emma, alike without likeness, hunger and hustle beyond compare, Rachel and Naphtali cross paths in a passage of the book of Jonah, deserted, unwritten. Upchucked by that unusual mythical fish, Jonah skirts the shore, sees them arrive. There Rachel, there Naphtali. The shambles bored me silly, he burloots out. The deer squeals. Never, Naphtali, did I dream I'd end up here in this poem. Alike, without alike, Emma and Neruda, Emma, endearing, down-wrapped. Well, that's Andre's. And I was going to read, I have this one curiosity. I've translated a book of Chus Paphos from Galician several years ago into English as Flesh of Leviathan. And then more recently I translated it into French. And it just came out last year in France. It's hard to get here, although it's possible to get it, obviously. So I'm going to read two poems of Chus's. I'll read in Galician, French, and English. They're just short poems, and I think they talk like Andres Hen's poems that I chose for you did about the act of writing poetry. This is called Silva Escura. Quisiera una palabra lindar, alcanzar una casa, una cidade, un aeroplano, vive nos confins. Nesta fraga, todas as terras, os animais, as árvores, são palavras. Agora é primavera. E nos noios, as lilas, as abrótias, os narcisos, todos são palavras. Vienen o incomensurable, são veraces e imóveis. Quisiera a palavra ser passado. Este que deita o seu cantar no azul, aqui, na fraga, no idioma, quisiera uma palavra lindar. Roncelet. Un mot aurait-vous à joindre, atteindre une maison, une ville, un avion, vie aux confins. Dans ce bois, toutes les terres, les animaux, les arbres sont des mots. Maintenant, c'est le printemps. Et aux pentes, les lilas, les asphodèles, les jonquilles sont tous des mots. Ils mesurent l'incommensurable, sont rapides et immobiles. Le mot aurait voulu être oiseau, celui qui dépose son chant dans l'azur, ici, dans le bois, dans la langue. Un mot aurait voulu adjoindre. And that poem in English, wilds. A word longs to adjoin, to reach a house, a city, an airplane. It lives on the edges. In this forest, all the lands, the animals, the trees are words. Now it's spring, and on the slopes, the lilacs, the buds, the daffodils, all are words. They measure the incommensurable, are swift and still. A word longs to be bird, the one that lays its song in the blue, here, in the forest, in the language. A word longs to adjoin. So there we have the partage that you were parler. Et le poème qui suit, ce poème dans le livre, est un poème qui prend place sur l'eau à Montréal. She's read in Toronto and in Montreal before, but she's never been invited this far west. Vedo una fontana clara, Adán que así cabalga, va de abismo en abismo, o si el texto è una traducción, o si el texto è intraducible. Esto linguistico que ci corta o alento. Como una pequeña embarcación en territorio dos Ganakawaki, o pueblo de los Silex, la Liga, los Iroquois, cruzantes os cargueros de Canada Steamships Lines, e subveches que en ningún idioma poderías decir la conmoción do corpo. Que o corpo non alcanza nunca o significado. Para o que te abre a boca, para o que te desprega os besos, por eso non hai razón. Así cabalgas, fondo sen fondo, como as mulheres errantes, desde un ultra futuro, con mutualidade dos barcos. And in French, qui boit de la fontaine claire. La dame qui monte ainsi va d'abîme en abîme. Son texte est une traduction, son texte est intraduisible. C'est linguistique qui te coupe le souffle. Quand dans une petite embarcation sur le territoire des Ganakawaki, le peuple de Silex, de la Ligue des Iroquois, tu as croisé le chemin des cargos de Canada Steamship Lines. Et tu as su qu'en aucune langue tu pourrais dire la convention du corps. Que le trope n'atteint jamais de signifier. Pour ce qui t'ouvre la bouche, pour ce qui te sépare les lèvres, pour ceci, il n'y a pas de raison. Ainsi tu montes, fond sans fond, comme les femmes errantes de notre futur, dans la mutualité des bateaux. A drink of clear waters. I'm not driving you nuts reading these 3 times. The damsel who rides out like that goes from abyss to abyss. Her text is a translation. Her text is untranslatable. Linguistic tick that takes your breath away. When in a small canoe on the lands of the Ganyagaraka, people of the Flint, the Iroquois League, you crossed paths with the freighters of Canada steamship lines. And you knew that in no language could you speak the turmoil of the body. The trope never arrives at the signified. For that which opens your mouth, for that which parts your lips, for this there is no reason. So you ride out depth without depth, as did the wanderers, women, from an ultra-future in the nuptiality of boats. So that's me living in the middle of Andre Saint-Just's poems. I'm going to read a bit about Theophilin, and before I start right in, I'll just read this little description of it so you know what it's about. It's a complex book, this poetic migration, but it's also very simple. It's the search of a translator to cross a border into the USA, backward, wanted to do that. And also into modernism by someone, me, who's not usually considered modernist according to the prevailing North American definition. In Europe, I'm considered modernist. Words are defined differently. Anyways, to cross that border and search of the answer to the question, why write a poem instead of something else? The book listens to the 20th century to 3 American women, modernist poets, all queer, Euro Rukeyser, Elizabeth Bishop, and Angelina Weld Grimking. Rukeyser was a poet activist whose work I read in the 1960s and 1970s, at which time I did not read Bishop at all, as I found her work too precious and too interior. It's too like rich people wrote it. And Grimke I didn't read at all until about 8 years ago when I read a poem of hers on Poetry Daily and sought out her work. And with these 3 sections, there's exploratory pieces by me. There's a section of poems written by me at the end that were stolen by Lisa Sampedrin, who's the restless and dissenting voice in the book, interfering as usual and dissenting even from the form of the book and from any hierarchy that places a poet or that might place a poet in charge of their own book. As well as Heidegger's shoe, it's a shoe, but I call it Heidegger's shoe. It also appears in the Elements, so you can read more about it there. And the title Theophilin is the name of an asthma medication no longer used, one that marked the 20th century, as these modernist poets did, and that marked my 20th century. And you'll be happy to know asthma medication is much better now. As you'll find out if you read the book. I'm going to start with a little bit from the Rukeyser section of the book, in which I talk a bit, I guess, about conditions of reception and conditions of production. When a poet goes to examine poets who are already in English, I don't have to translate them, so what can I learn about them? What are we left with? Are my explorations of several things, and some of those were conditions of production of their work, and then conditions of reception of the people who were receiving their work. I think of conditions of reception. Rukeyser does know that these exist. She faces up to Senator McCarthy and his anti-communist inquisitors. She insists that the reader is essential to the poem. Yet she is more passionately involved in production. Giving it out is a loquacity. This giving is to her crucial to the reception, but herein lies an illusion about reception never fully examined. Though she believes that the poem exists because a reception is possible via readers or listeners, to my knowledge she never questions publicly who and how the listener is able to receive her words. Her listener is simply assumed to be like her in class, race, and condition of hunger. But who is receiving? Who listens? Her work testifies to social responsibility, an enduring part of Judaic tradition. For Rukeyser, life is a gift, gratuitous, as Chuspato might say, meant to be inhabited and enacted consciously at every moment in response to the world and others, and this responsiveness is a praise. To make the broken world less broken, Rukeyser nurtures justice and the virtues in her own socius, America. In a way, she addresses not these particular readers or these particular listeners, she addresses America. Who can speak or not speak in America is unexamined and eluded, as it is by and large in later poetry that's been called poetry of witness. But Rukeyser does not witness, she rhetoricizes. At least she seems to take on and acknowledge this role of rhetoric that speaks on behalf of all. Like Whitman, who drew his rhythms from his body and the sea, she articulates the relation of our breathing to our heartbeat. But what is this America? Who breathes? The insistence of ours voice is a rhetoric that opens sound and word together in penetrating and resonant complicity. With this voice you are safe, listener. In its gravity and generosity, the you and the me are safe. History speaks us and we speak to history. Nor is sexuality absent in her lines, the prick and cunt, nor birth, for suns fall burning into Asia. But what is ours, Asia? A word. Does she give us this word Asia to speak of American suns in Vietnam? Is it them that burned? But Asia already has its sons who are on their own ground do speak, but not in Rukeyser's poem. The poem inhabits and sustains empire. Even in its speaking, an empire sustains its accent, and she prepares it, all the sky. I reject this. Children burning in the catacombs. Before we were wombs, we were houses. I wrote those lines. I quote from Nolan. Asia is a comfort to me. Asia in my mother's eyes, not east but west, without memory, curtained from Europe. Before we were a joy, we were humility that was not humiliation. Landing in the boats, numbers were pinned upon the children's coats. Oh, heart. And there's 3 lines crossed out, but they're still present. But in listening, Rukeyser's cadences enact us. With her we ride a chariot across the sun. No simple story here. Here's Rukeyser on TV. There's also this struggle. This is from Camera 3 in 1965 with poets James Dickey, Peter Varick, and host James McAndrew. James, Peter, and James. Probably I don't need to read any more of this page, but I will. Peter interrupts Rukeyser constantly in volume, a logorrhea, and squirms endlessly in his chair with his arms darting outward, occupying not just oral space but visual, making it hard to grasp what Rukeyser is trying to say. Rukeyser says the general nervousness about poetry. Rukeyser says the desire for law, the desire for form. Rukeyser says of poetry an effort at speech. The 3 men talk over her and she has a hard time getting a word in edgewise. Rukeyser at 15 minutes, 53 seconds. I am impossible, I cannot exist. Women poets can't exist. Rukeyser at 19 minutes, 10 seconds when asked to read, reads part 12 of The Outer Banks. The edge of experience. Women, ships, lost voices. Her determination to recuperate histories of the marginalized that would otherwise be lost. So that speaks to her feminism, to the difficulty of it. Being a woman poet at that time. Then there's a poem called Flying to Hanoi, which is a Rukeyser poem, scratched out by Elisa Sampedrin. I'll just show it to you. I have the right to put it in the book like this, but I do not have the right to read it. I'll just read you the last line, which is not crossed out. My life is flying to your life. And Rilke answers that in his archaic torso of Apollo, saying, you must change your life. And I think I'm going to jump ahead from there to me listening. In the Woodbury Poetry Room, ears transfixed by the gravelled consonants and lengthened vowels of Rukeyser's oration, I balk at the sincerity of witnessing in poetry without engaging the conditions of reception that make listening possible. To witness, to really witness, is to bear the weight and agony of a heard story into your core so that your next acts are infused and altered. As in Rilke witnessing the torso of Apollo, not flying to the life of another, not appropriating a story into your own speech, but to realize, in a realization that is act accomplished in action, you must change your life. Rukeyser restlessly keeps speaking. The public feels a soulagement, a recognition, but then who acts? Who realizes that act accomplished in action? Rukeyser, I am working out the vocabulary of my silences. The shape of the body speaking its evidence. Who will speak these days, if not me, if not you? Again, it brings back Rilke. And then there's a sign saying, please believe the punctuation. Rukeyser had a rubber stamp to stamp that on her submissions to warn editors to leave her punctuation alone. And I'll just read a couple of pages now from the Angelina Grimke section. A sorrow and a silence will burn in Grimke's poetry, as well as kisses, light, and longing. Addressing the conditions of reception as Rukeyser and Bishop never did, for she had no choice. Her work is full of images of stark, leafless trees pointing and scratching. Conditions of reception meant Rilke will not be able to read in poetry to give back out, not be able to readily address an American socius as an American, a la Rukeyser, or turn poetry inward into the mysteries of the unexpected for an educated literary elite, Bishop. She will command neither the social nor the personal. Because she necessarily speaks as a black and as a woman, the rostrum will be closed off to her in the teens and 20s of the 20th century, at least in part. Closed like the parloir or speaking space in the set of Rachel, her play. So though closed off and airless, the parlor is safer than the street. Both more and less can be said on this. It's like a closet, but involuted. It makes speaking possible, but the speaking in the closet is impossible for others outside to hear. And so I have one of the poems that she first wrote. That was, okay, I'm just going to read this page. Angelina Webb Memorial, because I thought, where did that page go? That tells you who she is, because probably, many of you probably don't know who she was. Well, Angelina Webb Memorial will write, share poetry, prose, and drama, and publish often before and during the Harlem Renaissance of the 20s, and will join Georgia Douglas Johnson's S Street Salon in Washington. Yet her voice is not mechanically recorded. It's not in the archive that I was in. It is found in no sound archive, though she lived until 1958. Her 173 poems are more like Bishop's opus than Rukeyser's. 31 poems were published in 1902 or thereabouts, and then in 1922 and 1927. Unlike Rukeyser, Grimke will not give out or give inward like Bishop. Is it that she will give up or give forward, pointing to a future to which archive is perhaps always blind and maybe a force of power, pointing to a future in a way my words and positions as a white lesbian inhibit me from seeing. Action, insofar as it engages the founding and preserving political bodies, creates the condition for remembrance. That is, for history, writes Hannah Arendt in Vita Activa, Chapter 1 in the Human Condition, a touchstone of Western white thinking. Yes, it's anachronist to quote Arendt. Grimke died the year The Human Condition was first published in New York City. But the grip of racism is anachronous. The present tense is anachronous, and therein lies pain for many of those who can only live in the present. For black and brown bodies, time is out of joint. And then in italics, the history we learn in schools is out of joint. Thinking Ukraine as I write these words in early 1922, but also the archipelagos, the Caribbean, and how a history centered there, in a history centered in the Caribbean, the Americas reads very differently. And I'll just close by reading one of the poems of Angelina Wellgrimke in English, and then I translated it into French. I think she deserves to be in French too. The Black Finger. I have just seen a most beautiful thing, slim and still against a gold sky. A straight black cypress, sensitive, exquisite, a black finger pointing upwards. Why, beautiful still finger, are you black? And why are you pointing upwards? Le toit noir, Angelina Wellgrimke. Je viens de voir quelque chose si belle, mince et immobile, quand un ciel d'or, un cycle noir et droit, sensible, exquis, un doigt noir pointé vers le haut. Pourquoi beau doigt immobile et tout noir? Et pourquoi pointes-tu vers le haut? Merci, thank you.